It's referred to as the lost decade. I mean, Japan has basically kind of been in a deflationary period for over a decade, but the thing that makes our situation so much worse is Japan in other respects is so much more financially healthy than we are. They run a trade surplus. They've got a strong tradition of true savings. You know, in America, we're not that fortunate.
Right. Well, it's quite theatrical. I mean, the whole thing, I don't know that you could write a better script for a tragedy. And it even goes beyond the banks and the banking system, because you can look at what AIG has done to itself as an insurance company, which seems to be off the charts reckless. You might explain a little bit about these credit default swaps and how they got in the business of insuring things that weren't really called insurance. They're, again, completely unregulated, but taking on tremendous risk.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax that a lot of folks may not know about, but credit default swaps, CDSs, are part of what's known as the derivatives market. And the derivatives market, I think, is what, about $500–600 trillion in size. I mean, it's massive. It dwarfs, you know, the other markets, and it's an unregulated market again. And given our modern fiat, you know, monetary system, that was bound to be a disaster. But it's essentially making bets on the default risk of individual companies. And these CDS markets have gotten to absurd proportions, where the size of a CDS market on a given company's credit worthiness, you know, just dwarfs the size of its market capitalization. I mean, you have, you know, trillions of dollars of, you know, for instance, of CDS derivatives being traded on the automakers that themselves have market capitalizations of just billions of dollars. So, you know,
so just to back up, so if I am a regular old, well, not regular old investor, but if I'm an investor or an institution, say, that's bought a bunch of bonds in, say, Lehman Brothers, because Lehman Brothers is selling bonds to pay for its operations, it's borrowing money from me, and it's going to agree to pay me interest, I might decide that, well, gosh, I just like to sleep a little better at night, so I'm going to buy insurance that in case Lehman Brothers were to go bankrupt, which that would never happen.
Oh, never
happen. I just want to pay a little extra and buy some insurance so that I'll be paid.
That's right.
So that my bonds will pay off even if Lehman goes bankrupt.
That's right. And of course the problem with that situation is that the counterparty that actually wrote that
person
CDS,
who sold me the insurance,
yes,
the insurance company.
Yes, the insurance company, the institution that wrote that CDS contract is in no position whatsoever to actually deliver on it. You know, should there be a default of Lehman.
And how does? And again, it's completely unregulated, which I guess is the problem. They're not calling it insurance. It's called a credit default swap. So it's not subject to regulation to say, well, if you're going to agree to pay off this much in claims, you've got to have this much in reserves and so forth.
That's right, and that's exactly how the situation has developed.
So why would people buy these things to the degree that they have? Or I guess it seems odd that I would be willing to. Because obviously everyone is writing them. I mean, it's interesting because I guess Lehman Brothers, they were writing a lot with CDSs, and that's in fact what brought them down. Yep. AIG is writing CDSs, and that brought them down.
Yeah. And well, how does this happen?
Did you sell any CDSs?
No, I've never sold any CDSs. For me, it's more plain vanilla. It's you know,
stocks
and ETFs and bonds and mutual funds, and I'm kind of glad that's my arena. I've never actually been involved in any of those crazy derivatives markets.
Because I wouldn't expect that anyone would believe that I would be able to make good on $100 million worth of bonds on GM.
Yeah, it's really absurd. It's really absurd to think that you know, the market in these derivatives has grown to just these multi-trillion-dollar sizes, and where there's no one can ever think that the counterparty has the capacity to deliver, you know, on these contracts. But that was the market that developed, and I think it really speaks to kind of you know, the moral hazard problem. And you know, when we're in the midst of this crisis now, and you know, when we see the AIG failure staring us in the face, when we see the Fannie Mae failure and Freddie Mac failure staring us in the face, when we see you know, this latest harebrained proposal, you know, we're always told, well, they just can't fail. We can't we can't allow these institutions to fail. The results would be too catastrophic. But that's what's, bailing these institutions out, these bailouts, is what has allowed us to get to this point. It's been accumulated bailout after bailout after bailout over many, many decades in this crazy fiat system that we have.
Well,
and there's this thinking that's developed that, when push comes to shove, the government will just not allow any of these entities to fail. Therefore, we can, with confidence, allow these kinds of crazy markets, unregulated markets, to develop. And that's kind of how it's happened.
It's fiat, but it's debt-based money too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So every dollar that we create to bail somebody out comes with a cost. It comes with interest that at some point theoretically must be repaid. And I guess that ultimately that's the question, right? Is if we're gonna come up with $1 trillion to fund this RTC, this vehicle to buy all this toxic debt, we have to create that as new debt, a new obligation, and it's going to be on somebody's balance sheet. Maybe it's not the Treasury's balance sheet, but it's out there, and it's got an interest expense. And what does that do to the credit rating of our country when the cost to service the debt, both public and private, is just going way up?
Well, really, that's staring at us right now, and there are a couple ways we can deal with it. We can either monetize our way out of it, and the Federal Reserve can just recklessly increase the money supply, and with the consequences of that to the dollar, or we can put it on the backs of the taxpayer and do it the Treasury route rather than the Federal Reserve route. And but it affects our creditworthiness, and it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if this really goes through, because some of the rating agencies have actually come out.
Great point.
And it would be funny if it would kind of be absurd and funny. I can't even begin to think of all the words, but it would be really something if it's actually the rating agencies that step up and kind of stop some of this insanity. But just recently, S&P reiterated that the U.S. government's creditworthiness has to be earned. It's not a right.
Given. Yeah.
And this was said subsequent to the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac bailouts, the AIG bailouts, and now, of course, apparently another mother of all bailouts is being proposed. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rating agencies handle this, because if there's a downgrade to U.S. Treasury debt, we're talking a whole nother crisis of massive proportions.
Absolutely. And then just the murmurings from our friends over in China saying that maybe it's time to start exploring a new economic order.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's like I said, hard to keep up with the fast pace of the news. But that was something else I read today, that apparently in some state-owned newspaper in China, there was a opinion piece that basically proposed that this international financial system's not working, and that we may need to look at alternatives to the dollar as the basis of the international financial order. So, and
them are fighting words.
Yeah, those are fighting words.
So, David, we got about 5 minutes left. What do you tell your clients to do?
Well, it's tough. It's a tough environment, and things are constantly changing. But I think there's some pretty key things that just regular folks can do to try to navigate through this tough period. One is reduce your level of indebtedness, particularly if you've got unsecured lines of debt, if you've got credit card debt, if you've got home equity lines of credit. Really focus in earnest in paying that stuff down. Get your own balance sheet in order. As we're discussing balance sheets of all these other institutions, get your own personal or your own family balance sheet in order. Also, diversification is key, and not just across financial assets. We're so used to talking about stocks and bonds and money markets and like treasury bills,
mattresses and bullets and food.
That's not out of the realm of possibility. Absolutely, real assets. I mean, make sure you've got some supplies of food. Make sure you've got some gold and silver. Make sure you've got an ample amount of cash on hand. That's absolutely right. Make sure that you are globally diversified and globally diversified across multiple currencies. Make sure that you've got perhaps some high quality debt that